Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. So it just got confirmed that Manifest is unfortunately officially cancelled and we won't be getting the final 3 seasons, which is such devastating and disappointing news. It's such a shame that Netflix, or any other broadcaster for that matter, didn't want to pick up this show and continue it, as it's such an awesome program with a fantastic cast and crew to match. The cliffhangers, storylines, characters were all sensational, and it would have been so awesome to see what would have happened next with the passengers of Flight 828. They've also released some weekly performance figures which have been unveiled by TV Line for the 3rd season, which averaged 3 million total viewers, which is actually pretty decent. That said, it was down 30% on its 1st season, which again is pretty common for a show in its 3rd season, and TV Line did also say that this show was ranked number 7 for NBC overall, which again is pretty impressive for a show in its 3rd season. So it's just such a real shame that it got cancelled. But that being said, I wanted to give my predictions on what I think would have happened next in seasons 4, 5 and 6 of Manifest. Just to note, this is totally fan fiction based upon the clues that they gave in the show. I do hope that one day in the future we will see some kind of storyboards or outline from the creators one day in terms of what their future of the show could have looked like, based upon the similar thing that Zack Snyder did for the 2nd and 3rd Justice League movies, so that we can see the true vision of what the future would have looked like for Manifest. But anyway, here are my predictions. So like I said in my season 3 review, by the way, the link for that is in the description box below, I think we would have seen what life without Grace would have looked like for the Stones family, which I'm sure would have been ultra depressing. Cal and Olive are now the same age, so that would have been a really interesting dynamic in terms of what these two characters, which were originally twins, would have looked like. But Cal would have lost so many years, so I can imagine he still would have acted and behaved like a child. I do think Grace would have eventually come back, maybe in season 4, as if I believe if a passenger kills someone, then they would return. So I think we would have eventually got back to the happy family dynamic after these tragic times for the Stones family. This would have also meant that the Major would have had an opportunity to come back as well, and would have caused absolute carnage for the Samvi character, who I believe would have gone to absolute breaking point for trying to cover up a murder. I can imagine Vance and certain other characters would have been brought into this storyline as well. The actress who was playing the Major then went on to star in Hellstrom, so I can imagine that her contract would have meant that she would have been back in future seasons, which would have been the same case for the Grace actress. I also think we would have seen the next development within the lifeboat storyline, which is that you can actually get out of the lifeboat through sacrifice. So as Cal sacrificed so many years of his life, I wonder if this means that he's no longer tied to the performance of the other passengers in order to survive his particular death day. So I think they would have introduced a new element whereby you can sacrifice something, for example, years on your life, in order to be judged on your own instead of linked judgment through every single person within your particular return. I think they would have also introduced some kind of time travel aspect, as when the plane came back, it seemingly was as if the pilot had never left. So I feel like this was a pilot from a different era. So I think they would have expanded this aspect to mean that other characters and other passengers would have come back, which would mean that there are different sets of the same characters within one timeline. So for example, the Manifest characters from the past and the Manifest characters from the future living in one timeline through time travel, which I think would have been a really interesting aspect. And I think also maybe some of the duplicate passengers, maybe some of them are really evil. So we see, for example, an evil Michaela with the nice Michaela, and maybe an evil Ben with the nice Ben as well, which I think would have been super interesting. I think Angelica would have tried to sacrifice the Eden character, but I think she would have just got stopped in the nick of time to ensure that Eden survives. And I'm sure that the Angelica character would then have gone back into the dungeon, which is where we found her. And I think we would have then resurfaced the 828 baby storyline, where loads of people are fascinated by an 828 baby, which I think they kind of just got that storyline and put that under the rug. So I think they would have brought that storyline back, which would have been really interesting. I think we would have also returned the storyline with Cal, where he's playing a lot more of an active role in visualizing what the callings actually mean, in terms of really drawing what future premonitions could look like, which I think is super interesting, as he was at one point the most callings in tuned passenger, I think Zeke, his telepathy would have grown even further, and maybe he could have influenced people's emotions. So he wouldn't just be listening to them, but he can really impact and persuade people to have certain emotions, which I think would have been really interesting. And then once he would have done all of that in a really good way, he would have returned to a normal life free of callings and telepathy. On that point, I think they would have explored Jared and Michaela for a little bit, but ultimately I think her and Zeke would have gotten back together, and Jared would have found someone else to be happy with, maybe even Drea, the other police character that was Michaela's partner. I think Olive would have also explored multiple relationships across the show, but then would have eventually ended up back with the TJ character. I also think they would have brought loads of the different groups back from the previous season. So for example, the Exos would have come back, the Church 828 followers would have returned, loads of fractions between the passengers and passenger haters. Maybe the scientists would have stayed and still been part of the storyline as well. And the passenger testers, maybe that group would have come back. So loads of different conflicts between loads of the different groups, and some inevitable bloodshed I can imagine was happening as well. The callings would have been even more powerful and intense. We did see that Michaela and Zeke were able to combine their callings and create their own calling, which I thought was really, really amazing, when they were warning Ben that Cal's life is in danger from the meth heads in season 3. So I feel like this ability would have grown even further, maybe even telepathically communicating with different characters despite not having the same calling, and maybe seeing the future in a lot more of a visible format as opposed to little premonition vision. So I think the callings definitely would have expanded and developed a lot more. And also the big mystery surrounding Flight 828, I feel like inevitably they would have said that it's very similar to the Noah's Ark and the Isaiah mystery, in the sense that a big natural disaster is coming, maybe the volcano that we saw in season 3, and the reason that the passengers did return was to warn people and to tell them about this big natural disaster, and maybe that's how the show would have inevitably ended, and to see who is going to survive this and who is not going to survive this, which would have been so interesting as a final season 6 closing. Again, it's such a shame that we won't be able to see what's going to happen in the final 3 seasons and seeing it play out in televised form, as the first 3 seasons were fantastic. Whether you liked it or you didn't like it, I feel like it was such a great job from the cast, the creators. They really poured their all into it, and it just would have been really nice to see what would have happened in the future. And it was just really cool as well, as when you see their interviews, you can just genuinely see that there's just such passion, not only for the work, but working together as a cast and crew, which would have been really nice. Hopefully one day in the future we'll get to hear from the creators themselves about what their actual vision was for seasons 4, seasons 5 and season 6. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear from you. What are your theories for what could have happened in the future of Manifest? Hopefully, like I said, we will get to see the storyboards and the actual plan. I'm sure they have a diagram somewhere, which is the breakdown of what was going to happen in the next 3 seasons. But like I said, I would love to hear your theories on it. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye, everyone.